1966, a legacy built to inspire and nurture future managers and leaders. Our dedication to professional excellence was deeply rooted in our hearts for Malaysia, providing an avenue for crucial conversations and networking amongst the public and private sector. We were the bridge for fluid collaboration between the two. Alumnus graduated to become the country's most successful and iconic professional leaders, forming a community that crosses boundaries, nationalities, languages, and industries to create a better way of doing business. The Malaysian Institute of Management was well on its way to greater heights.
Breaking news. We are following news of a fire that broke out in Campbell Complex, Kuala Lumpur.
The financial meltdown of 1997, Malaysia
records its highest daily death toll since the start of the pandemic, as the movement control order is extended.
Amidst disheartening times, MIM ascended to greater strength, living in an unprecedented era of technological, social, and economic change. Being resilient, relevant, and current resonates in our heartbeat. Blessed with empowering management that breaks barriers, we stood strong to our vision and mission, ensuring impactful professionals and public leaders are well equipped and groomed, accelerating partnerships across regions and around the world, bringing the best possible management and leadership practices. We designed and curated programs with the highest global standards and recognitions, embracing innovation and ingenuity by delivering augmented services in quality, experience, and business impact. To date, MIM has trained and certified over 1 million individuals from 19 different countries, upholding diversity and gender equality inclusion, engaging individuals to inspire, collaborate, share, and interact, embracing learning with a world-class mobile-ready learning management system with AI and robust reporting, learning on the move, made accessible anytime, anywhere. Exploring signature and hybrid events, learning insights and webinars that bring individuals together for work and play. MIM aspires to continue flourishing the minds and hearts of future leaders with an exciting, exhilarating, and invigorating culture, elevating individuals into a world of new possibilities and experience, nurturing managers and leaders through time. Our leadership legacy. We are MIM. Celebrating 55 years of excellence.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to everyone today. I'm Jacqueline from the Membership Department. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for our first CPD Talk of the year. We had about over 90 registrations for this CPD Talk, and currently we have about 30 over people joining us today. So today we have a very distinguished guest with us, Mr. Santa Kumar. Mr. Santa is an executive coach, experienced corporate leader, seasoned trainer, and qualified psychotherapist who partners with his clients to bridge the gap between where they are and who they are and who they want to become. He has decades of experience as a senior executive in multinational corporations, with his last corporate role being the CEO of Tandem Computers, with responsibility for much of Asia. In this role, and in his previous one as a managing director at NCR Malaysia, he held full P&L responsibility. Santa has considerable international and multicultural experience. He has lived, worked, and studied in Asia, Europe, and the US. Without further ado, let me hand it over to Mr. Santa Kumar. Over to you, Mr. Santa.
Screen, right? Am I right? Here we are. All right, so I hope you can hear me. Can you?
I'm sharing. Yeah, sharing again.
Okay. I'm sharing and share it again. Stop share. All right. Okay. Is that okay?
The next slide.
So are we all set for the talk? If you can wave your hand to me, please, and tell me you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
All right. Thank you for that, Jamal. Thank you for that. I was referred to an esteemed guest. That was the first time that phrase has been used for me. Right? I'm very honored to be here. I'm very excited to be here. The excitement is one of gladness, and the excitement is also one of anxiety. My yoga teacher tells me to take 3 deep breaths, and I'm going to take a single breath. Yeah. And he often says, no sweat, no pressure. No sweat, no pressure. That's what he tells me. So thank you for being with me for the next 2 hours. Each one of you, if you stick through this, you're going to be investing 2 hours of your time today, 2 hours of your time today. And I do hope that the value you take away from this workshop is greater than the 2 hours of investment you are making to me. I also want to thank MIM for reaching out to me when they reached out to me and asked me whether I would want to do such a workshop. I have to admit that I have butterflies in my stomach, and I wondered whether I should do the talk or not do the talk. And finally, I decided that I had to step out of my comfort zone. I had to challenge myself. I had to continually be in the stretch zone. So when I told my wife about the fact that I shall be giving this particular talk, and she over the phone says, I have to stop repeating myself. She says, I often say the same thing several times. And she said that you don't want to come across as an old man. And I told her that I am 80 years old, if you've forgotten it. I am 80 years old. And so at 80, I might have my long-term memory, but probably not my short-term memory. And so I might repeat myself. So you guys will have to excuse me. At 80, I need some crutches. I need my notes. I need certainly your attention and your engagement. Right? And the worst nightmare that I can possibly suffer is if you remain silent or you disappear off the screen and you don't necessarily ask me any questions. As a Malaysian who has lived for some 26 years in India, I've come across a quirk that Indians have. Whenever I say to them, congratulations, you have done very well, they often turn to me and say they have done well because of my blessings, and I don't ever remember giving them my blessings. Though I find it somewhat odd, I want your blessings today. I want the blessings of your engagement, your attention, and your questions. And though I was told that the questions would come at the tail end of the talk, if there are any compelling questions, please do not hesitate to put them to me. The talk that I'm about to give you is an extract of a 2-day workshop. And it was somewhat of a challenge to cut up my workshop to come up with this particular talk. So if we can refer to the first slide, which really declares the title of the talk, which is Influence Beyond Formal Authority. And you see in the background where we have the moon influencing the tides. Right? And in nature, there is actually no formal authority in nature. The kind of influence that is expressed in nature is often symbiotic. Yeah, it's reciprocal. It is kind of interdependent. And I think that there is much we ourselves can learn from nature. And how can we influence others in a seamless manner rather than using our power or rather than using our authority of our position? Now, the title, Influence Beyond Formal Authority, suggests that if you did not have formal authority, how would you influence others? And if you did not have enough formal authority, right, how would you influence others, if not increase your influence? Now, if you are ambitious, if you wish to be successful, then I would say this particular talk is pivotal to you. If you believe that you are already successful and you don't necessarily need more knowledge, then I would probably suggest that you have better things to do than listen to my talk. Now, this is representative of an ecosystem, and in every ecosystem, elements are very, very much dependent on each other. And if you did remove one or two elements within the ecosystem, it can destroy not only the ecosystem, it could destroy all of existence in the ecosystem. Let me speak about bees, for instance. Bees are declining, right? And if bees in our ecosystem become extinct, there could be a food disaster and humanity would be threatened. Yeah. So interdependency is very much embedded in all our ecosystems. And interdependency is a given, though we don't necessarily see it ourselves. Often I get people saying to me that, I do not like to depend on others. Yeah, I do not like to depend on others because it makes me feel obligated. And the reality is that you and I cannot be self-reliant, because if we are completely self-reliant, we wouldn't survive. It is because of our dependencies and our interdependencies that we are alive. So within organizations too, there is always the dynamics of interdependencies. When you think about it, someone else's output becomes another person's input, and that other person takes on that input, works with it, and produces an output which then becomes another person's output. There is interdependency. Now, for those of you who work in organizations, I would suggest that you depend on your boss to give you a good appraisal, to promote you, to give you a better salary so that you can have a better life. Now, your boss depends on you to deliver, right? So that he can look good with his stakeholders. The last time that I was in an organization was, I think, in 1991, when I worked in Tandem Computers in Singapore. During my days of work, structures were far simpler and they were more compact and completely less complex. However, today we find that because of globalization, because of technology, structures within organizations have become complex, ambiguous, and challenging. And reporting lines have also become complex, ambiguous, and challenging. We hear of direct and dotted lines, and there are people in organization who are somewhat confused. Who really are they answerable to? Who really is going to do their appraisal? Who really, when it's time to get a promotion, who would put up their hands for me or for any other individual? So for an example, I'll give you an example. I work with an organization, and that organization has operations in Poland, in Chennai, in Kuala Lumpur, and in Tianjin, China. And these operations belong really to the same unit. Although they are all part of the same unit, each organization has a different reporting line, which makes it somewhat confusing and challenging. But yet they are dependent on each other to get their deliverables done. Now, there are teams, this team in particular that I spoke about, right, that is dispersed across zones, yet interdependent, should I say, interdependent. So dependency is actually a way of life, whether it's out in the world or whether it is within organizations, and we rely upon each other to be successful. Today's organization's environment, as I mentioned before, has become very, very challenging because of its complexity, its ambiguity, and it is sometimes somewhat confusing as well. Organization structures have gone through many reinventions to create lack of clarity for a lot of employees. And in such an environment, you are going to require greater leadership to get things done. More sophisticated leadership skills is required to get So assuming I'm in an organization and I need to get my work done, the skills of yesterday is not going to be sufficient. I have to upgrade my leadership skills. It's got to be far more sophisticated in order to get the support, the cooperation, and the compliance of others who are not under my control, because they are in different chain of commands. They report to someone else, and yet I require them to get my work done. And if I had to go ahead and act independently of them, if I had to go ahead and make decisions independently of them without consulting them, will lead to negative repercussions for me. There will be resentment built against me. There could be escalations to their bosses about me, and I could have my boss coming down to me and saying that I should not have done that. And even if I use my leadership skills to mobilize a lot of people and for us to get into a meeting to collaborate about a particular job, to get the agreement of others is a challenge. Consider the unit that I talked about that is dispersed across Poland, Chennai, Kuala Lumpur, and Tianjin. Now, they have to work together, and yet they are all very diverse. They come from different cultures, they have different education, their religions are different, right? They work on the basis of different values, etc. So trying to agree on who should do what, when should it be done, and what should be done can be a huge challenge. It becomes another leadership challenge. Okay. So to get everybody on the same page is today a leadership challenge. Now, if I had, or if you had considerable positional power or authority, then these challenges can be addressed. So if we take the likes of Putin of Russia, when he issues an order, it gets done. When Xi Jinping issues an order, it gets done. And that's because they have considerable power, authority. But you don't. Yeah. And if we look at it, you have a power gap. Yeah, the reality is there is a built-in power gap in the roles you have. And I say this because there is a power gap between what you have in the role and what you need to get the job done. And also, I'm sorry about this, I should go back to the other slide, right? And there is also a power gap between what you have and what others have from whom you need cooperation, their support, and their compliance. So what you end up doing is spending a considerable amount of time and energy to secure the help of others. And when you seek the help of others who might resist, who might have their own interest at heart, and my priority is not their priority, there is what I call a lot of emotional labor. This kind of labor, when you deal with a lot of people to get everybody to cooperate, to support you, to get your compliance, is called emotional labor. And the greater the emotional labor that you expend, you are draining your psychic energy. And at the end of the day, you go back home drained, and you sometimes wonder, what happened to me? How is it possible that I feel drained out? I feel somewhat browned out or burned out. So it's really necessary for you to close the power gap that is inherent in the roles that you have. You need to attain more power to influence the behavior and the actions of others. You're not able to grow your positional power unless you move up the corporate ladder and right up the corporate ladder. Unfortunately, that's not a reality that's going to happen. So you've got to look at other ways of closing the gap, right? And whether you move up the corporate ladder or not, let's assume you do move up the corporate ladder, I still insist that there is a power gap. You could be the CEO of a company. There is going to be a power gap. There is going to be a power gap between the CEO and the board of directors. There's going to be a power gap between the CEO and stakeholders. So the objective of this talk really is to bridge the power gap that is inherent in the roles that you have, so you could be more effective in getting your job done. So we are today going to be looking at different kinds of power other than formal authority, other than positional power to bridge the gap. Now, I think you get the sense that power is a necessity. Power is what makes things happen. It gets things done in organization and anywhere else. Now, without power, there would be no order. There would be complete chaos. So if I go to a particular market and I am intending to buy something from the market, people are really eyeing the money power that I have. And so I get, a lot of people calling out to me to purchase their goods so that I could part with my money power. Power is at play, not only in organizations, but at home too. You might find there is a power differential between husband and wife, that there is definitely a power differential between parents and children. And when parents use their power, children do know subconsciously where power lies, and they get, and they become somewhat obedient. There is power on the roads. You are driving and you are somewhat concerned with the policeman on the road. And when the traffic police is directing the traffic, he is exercising his power. So when power talks, things get done. So it is, I be repeating myself, but it is necessary to cultivate power, especially to influence people outside of your chain of command, and also people who are senior to you. Right? So if people are within your chain of command, then your positional power is sufficient. But once it is outside of your chain of command, you're going to have to use something other than positional power. And this slide speaks about the absence of power. Imagine each one of you not having power at all. You will be ineffective and you can't deliver. You will be a failure, right? Because you will be unable, you would suffer from weakness, you would be powerless, you would have incapacity, you would be incompetent, etc., etc. Sadly, the people who suffer from this kind of qualities are the poor, the refugees, and usually the employees at the bottom of the organizational structure or pyramid. I hope you're able to read this. This is a quotation from Dr. John Cotter. He's the dean of the leadership school at the Harvard University, or the Harvard Business School, actually. And what he says here is that managers require to be skilled at acquiring and using power, right? And then he goes on to say they need to develop the instincts to effectively acquire and use power. So before I continue, let's have a common understanding of the definition of power so that you and I are on the same page. Very often when I do ask people, what do you think is the definition of power? Often they would come up with many different definitions of power. So power is the capacity of A to influence the behavior of B, so that B does things that she or he would not otherwise do. Yes, so power is the ability that we use to get other people to do what they would not otherwise do. Yeah. And wherever we are, if you happen to be in an organization, you do subconsciously know in the organization who has the power. And when you are in the presence of power, your behavior changes, although you might not be aware that your behavior changes. So now I want to talk about the classical definition of leadership. The classical definition of leadership is influence, right? But actually influence comes from power. So when we say that a person is exercising leadership, now that person is directly or indirectly using the power that he possesses to influence another person or a situation. So today we are going to look at the different strategies that will allow you to grow your power, right? So that you are able to influence others, so that you are able to grow your leadership. So the definition says that power, influence, and leadership are all somewhat synonymous. All right, now before I go on to look at the other kinds of power, I want to look at what most of us are familiar with, which is formal authority. So what I want to do today is to unpack formal authority. Now, very often, formal authority or legitimate power that we can speak of is given to us because of the role that we possess. And as a consequence, we become the boss, the so-called boss, to the people who report to us. And as the boss, and because that I have legitimate power, I can say to a group of people after a meeting, I can say quite firmly, I have heard what you have to say, and however, this is the decision I am making, and I want you to execute this. In a way, what I'm saying is, do as I say. This is my decision. Do as I say. So this kind of leadership style is the directive leadership style. If I use formal authority and legitimate power, quite often that it is the direct leadership style, or I could call it the command and control leadership style, or the authoritative leadership style. Yeah. And part of formal authority is also the ability to reward others or to be able to bribe others. In other words, I'm saying to others, yeah, that these are my expectations. And if you are able to provide me with what I want, I will give you a reward. Now, this is not stated explicitly, but this is stated implicitly, right? And, you know, at the end of the year, yes, I will determine whether you have met my expectations, and if you haven't, I deny you a good appraisal, I deny you a good salary increase, I will deny you a promotion. And because of my reward power that I possess, I can persuade people to satisfy my needs and my expectations. The other aspect of formal authority is coercive power. And this is this is what a lot of thugs and gangs use, right? This is what the mafia used. And they go around from shop to shop, restaurant to restaurant, saying to them, right, I'm going to protect you and you will have to pay me, okay? And if you don't pay me, I will break a leg or two. Now, within the corporate environment, the way bosses use coercive power is to say, unless you do as I say, you might end up not having a job. Yeah. Unless you do as I say, I'm sorry to say, you're going to be stuck in the role that you are for years to come. Okay. Now, I was coaching someone from eBay, and the people who were reporting to Rajesh, which was his name, had complained to the head office about his style of leadership. And his style of leadership was often using coercive power. And he would rave and shout, and he would intimidate people. And in the case of Rajesh, he had only a single tool in his leadership toolkit, and that was to use his coercive power. All he had was formal authority. Yeah. And with people such as this, wherever they go, they only see nails because the only tool they have is a hammer. There are many limitations to positional power. Now, firstly, positional power or formal authority is not something that you come with when you join an organization. Actually, when you are at the doorstep of that organization on your very first day, you are devoid of power. You don't have any power. But the moment they put you into a role, alongside with that role, formal authority is bestowed on you, but it's not necessarily told to you. Now, today you have positional power. Remember this, as quickly as positional power is given to you, it can be taken away from you. For instance, when there is a major layoff and they will have to give you the pink slip, you are stripped of the positional power that you had. It has other limitations too. It can only be used in certain situations, right? You can't use it with your peers. You can't use it with your stakeholders. You can't use it with your bosses. You can only use it with your directs. And having said that, if there is excessive use of it, then the use of positional power becomes toxic. Yeah. when you overuse it, you make people feel powerless, you intimidate people. Inevitably, what you do is you're distancing other people from you, and they talk ill of you, right? And they are no longer the spokesman. They speak somewhat badly of you. One other thing that I have to say is, in my coaching journey, I often found that people who have been bestowed, who have been given formal authority, don't use it. For me, when people don't use their formal authority in certain situations, then it is dereliction of duty. It is dereliction of duty. You would use it when someone is not being accountable for the work they should produce or the outcome of the work they produce. And when they don't use it, when there is tardiness, when people are turning up late for meetings, when they are turning up late for work. So all of you know who Kenneth Blanchard is, yeah? Who Moved the Trees, I think. That's the book that he wrote. And he wrote another book called The 1 Minute Manager. And it is, we all do know this, that the key to successful leadership is influence and not authority. So we have seen the limitations of formal authority. We have seen that formal authority is short-lived and inflexible, and there are too many shortcomings to formal authority. And if you didn't have formal authority and you are able to influence others to do what they would not otherwise do, then that leadership influence comes from personal power, which is what I'd like to talk to you about today, personal power. So to bridge the gap between the power, positional power you have and the power you need, the power you have and the power others have, you're going to need positional power. You're going to need personal power, should I say. You're going to need personal power to be able to influence people outside your chain of command. And this personal power can be developed. You may not know it, but I am pretty certain that you have it. But I don't know to what degree you have it. And you're probably unaware that you do have it. So let's look at the faces on this particular slide. You wouldn't, for instance, relate these young faces to having power. And yet, these faces are faces of actual young people who are able to use social media and influence over I would say over 12 million people, if not more. And for instance, the lady on the right-hand side of the slide, she is Joelle Siva. She's 18 years old, and she has a followership of about 13 million people across the world. She is an influencer. And she influences people because of a personal power. And most of you know of Oprah Winfrey. Yeah. Oprah Winfrey possesses personal power. And when she gets onto a Twitter account and speaks about a book she has read and how we ought to get the book, right? We will go out and get the book and read the book. And the author is very glad for the influence of Oprah Winfrey. Now, when you do possess personal power and considerable amount of personal power, it can also be said that you possess a personal brand. You also have a personal brand. So personal power and personal brand are synonymous. Yeah. So someone like Oprah Winfrey has considerable amount of personal power, and you will agree that she also has a considerable, a high profile personal brand. So what are the key features of personal power? Now, it is a power that is inherent in you. It is not bestowed on you. Yeah, it's inherent in you. It is cultivated by you. It is developed by you, unlike positional power. You possess positional power because of your conscious effort, yeah, because of your capabilities, your skills, and you possess personal power because of internal factors such as your character, such as your personality. Now, these are the things that give you personal power. And so when you leave an organization and when you leave a role in the organization, you lose your positional power. But no one can take away your personal power. When you leave an organization, you go with it. They are yours to keep, unlike positional power. And unlike positional power, there is no limit to growing your personal power. The potential, I would say, is really anonymous. Sorry, should I say really enormous, should I say. Yeah, you can use it in all directions with all kinds of people. You would use it with your subordinates, your peers, your senior, your management, your stakeholders. While you would use your position of power in very specific situations, personal power has no limits as to where you can use it. It will serve you well at work. It will serve you with your personal life. It will serve you with your friends and relationships. So there are three aspects. I don't know whether you can see this. I hope it's clear to you that there are three aspects to personal power. Perhaps, Kabi, is it worthwhile probably stopping here now before and asking for questions?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yes. All right, so I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to give my throat a rest, and I'm going to take a sip of a warm concoction that I have here in my hands. So in the meanwhile, I would appreciate you asking me questions. Remember, I said at the outset, I need the blessing of your questions. It puts me at ease.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, one question.
Sure.
How do we ensure that if we are in power, the power we use is not excessive?
Which kind of power in particular?
Uh,
Are you referring to positional power, formal authority?
both can.
Yeah, yeah.
So that
How do you know when it's excessive?
or how can ensure that it is not excessive?
Yeah, how can you ensure it's not excessive?
Yeah.
You can look at the body language of the people around you. Yeah. And the behaviors of people around you. And if you're using it in one particular instant, you can probably get away with it, provided it was appropriate. Yes, provided that was appropriate. However, if you continue using it everywhere you go in an appropriate fashion, the people around you will inevitably distance themselves from you. Yeah, let's take your directs, for instance. Yeah, they know you have the power.
Yeah.
They will turn up at work.
Yes.
Yeah, they will do as little as possible. Yeah, they will be disengaged. Performance will fall. Productivity will fall. And they could also escalate it to HR. And to be able to say to HR that this is a boss that I would rather not work with because he's toxic.
But then sometimes the direction of or the how do you say, what's arahan? Instruction that we give is appropriate, but then they couldn't see it that it's the appropriate at that very time or any other time. But then what they see is work burden and so on and so on, or more work towards them.
Yes, and I think that when you're issuing instructions, that's legitimate. Yes. However, how you issue it is also important.
Yeah.
How you frame it, right? Framing is important. You have to frame it skillfully. If you are able to frame an instruction skillfully, then you are using your personal power.
Yeah. It has to be used together.
Yes.
Both powers.
Yes. Yes. So is there anybody out there?
I have informed the participants if they have an option. If they're not willing to unmute themselves and ask the questions to you, they can always type it into the chat box. And as I see them, I'll let you know about it.
All right. Okay. I have to say that it's somewhat unnerving for me that I don't know whether anyone is out there. I might be speaking to myself, and I will continue to do my duty, that is to speak to myself. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack personal power. And there are three parts to it.
So N says we are here.
All right, thank you for confirming that. Thank you, Joseph. Varghese, for confirming that. So where was I? I was going to unpack personal power, and I was saying there are three parts to it. Right? If you had all of them, it would be just simply quite amazing. So we will look at each one of them and what you can do to acquire them. So the three parts are we're going to look at relational power, right? And I think you have heard this being said, who you know matters, right? Who you know matters. So that's the first power that we will look at. Subsequently, we will go on to be looking at expert power, which you can acquire, which you can enhance, and that use it to influence others. And therefore, you are demonstrating greater leadership. An expert power is what you know well matters to others. What you know well can add value to others. What you know well is required by others, and that gives you expert power. And the last part of personal power is referent power, where people really respect you, they trust you completely, right? They admire you, and they look up to you as a role model. So let's look at relational power. And as the phrase says, it is the power that you will secure by virtue of the very good relationships that you have with others. And you have put a lot of time and energy developing that relationship. And in such good relationships, the trust level is unquestionable. The trust that you have developed with them and they have developed with you has been developed on the basis of you telling the other, I am there for you, irrespective of what the situation is. I am there for you. Now, during my coaching journey where I'm coaching clients, I often ask them this question. What is the greatest source of your challenges? What is the greatest source of your challenges? And the room goes quiet. They lean back and they look up at the ceiling and they think for quite a while. And then they come up and they say, people. It always is people. You know, that's the biggest challenge, people. It's a challenge to get them to meet your expectation. It's a challenge to get them to get their support, their cooperation, their collaboration, right, and their compliance. Yeah, and I think all of us have experienced relationships where it can be strained, right? And if not adversarial, you know, and other people have something against us and might be talking behind our back, trying to put us down. Yeah. And when all of that happens, we are, of course, quite guarded against such people because there is a trust deficit. And in the presence of such people, we are guarded and we're not going to be authentic. Most of us, I think, are working in silos. And most of us not most of us, I would say all of us are in pursuit of self-interest. Right? Self-interest is an amazing force that makes the world turn around, makes things happen. It is because of self-interest that we act. It is very rare to have the likes of Mother Teresa. Yeah, so when somebody tells me that I am acting on the basis of the other interest, I am going to be discounting them. Yeah, so there are challenges, you know, relationships are strained, adversarial, there's a deficit of trust in relationships, other people are pursuing their self-interest, we do not understand each other, we do not support each other, and yet what we want is, we want good relationships. Yeah, we want good relationships such that we can have a handshake with someone else rather than using the glove. We want a change in the dynamics with other people, but we don't quite know how to achieve the change in dynamics such that we are supportive of each other. Yeah. We all, I would imagine that if I asked you how many years of education you've had, I've had close to 20 years of education. Sadly, my 20 years of education has not taught me how to develop good relationships, right? Whether it's in a marriage or outside of a marriage. So we struggle with developing meaningful, trusting relationships, right? So let's come back to relational power. You will attain power when you have excellent relationships with others. Now, there is a saying that I heard my wife utter the other day to my daughter, and the saying says, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Yeah. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. And the reason for saying that is, there is
There's a message from Michael.
Yes. Sure, I agree. Michael, I agree with you, Michael, that spiritual power is something that we can have, and we can actually use it to spread loving kindness and care and concern. In a sense, I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So you have to keep your enemies close with the intention really of working on those relationships and converting an adversarial relationship to a friendly relationship. And in order for you to develop relational power, a prerequisite for that is, as I said earlier, forming relationships, right? And you do that through networking. And you have to see today, in today's world, in today's roles, in today's job, you have to see network management as part of your role. It might not be defined in your job description, but you'll have to do it. You'll have to form relationships, maintain relationships, and sustain relationships as a central part of your job. Far too many people ignore networking and they pay a very huge price when it comes to time for promotions. And the reason is today promotions are not given by a boss. Promotions are given actually by a group of people within your organization. And your name comes up and the name comes up, let us say my name comes up and my boss says to someone, to Kabi, what do you know about Santa? And Kabi would say, Santa who? Santa who? And Santa is not known. And consequently, it's very, very clear you are not visible within the organization. You haven't been networking within the organization and you pay the price for it. And one reason I think we make a mistake in not seeing networking as part of our role is because we are too focused on the technical aspects of our role and the deliverable aspects of the work. So you have to be skillful at forming, managing, and sustaining a set of relationships, particularly with stakeholders who are relevant to your objectives and your professional growth. Before I get into this particular slide, which says you have to transform your engagement with your stakeholders, I want to speak about a coaching client of mine. And this happened in Chennai, and he had recently been promoted to his job, which was head of operations for retail banking. And he decided that what he needed to do was to go and visit his stakeholders, right? And what he did was he prepared an excellent presentation deck. And he went off to Dubai. And he said he wanted to meet with his key stakeholders together with the key stakeholders staff. He got them all into a room and he stood up and he did his presentation of his deck. And before too long, he'd gone perhaps 10 minutes into his presentation when the stakeholders put up his hand and say, Santosh, could you stop for a while, please? Yeah, could you stop for a while? And he put it, I'm told, quite gently, you seem to be telling me all about yourself and how great you are and the wonderful things you're doing for everybody. But I think the far more important thing to do is to first understand me, to understand what my needs are, what my expectations are, what my challenges are, what my pain points are, what keeps me awake at night, right? And only then, right, can you come up with something relevant rather than something that is very generic. Yeah. And Santosh will never, ever forget that episode with his stakeholder. He learned a significant lesson from that. So when you meet your stakeholders, and if you want to develop relational power, you definitely have to transform the way you relate with those who have a stake in you and with those you have a stake, with those who have a stake in you and with those you have a stake in. So it's really important when you are having an engagement with stakeholders, not to be looking at yourself, but to let your focus be on them. Their challenges, their pain points, their needs, their critical success factors. You should focus on making them successful. Let your interest be their interest. Okay? Or should I say, let their interest be your interest. Let their interest be your interest. And if you can do this consistently, you will become relevant to your stakeholders. And the word relevant means that you are important to your stakeholders.
There's some comments coming.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the first one.
Yeah, I have a message here from Siti Rashida. Right? Yes, by the way, I am an introvert too. I was an introvert when I was CEO of NCR Malaysia. I was an introvert when I was running Tandem Computers and responsible for much of Asia. And yet I realized that I had to do extroversion. Yeah, I had to be in touch with my customers, my stakeholders, and it's rather tough, really, rather tough. It's rather challenging. And I would prefer to be in my comfort zone, but I had to push myself to get myself out of the comfort zone into the stretch zone and do that regularly until it becomes more and more comfortable. So the only thing that I would say is to take baby steps, to continue taking baby steps, to step out of your comfort zone and make it a habit and grow that comfort zone over a period of time. So that's what I would immediately say. It takes courage, by the way. One of the reasons why also introverts don't want to network, speak up, is they also sometimes feel that they are not good enough. Yeah, there is a sense of insecurity about them. And I would say to them, those who feel insecure and not good enough, etc., I would say in reality, you are already complete. Yeah, be in touch with that completeness that you already are. All right, so this is a stakeholder relevance ladder which I came up with some years ago. And I have to thank somebody, his name was Ed Bolson. And he was, I was running a workshop for Standard Chartered Bank in Malaysia, and he was the keynote speaker. And he had to speak something on the subject of stakeholder management. And he spoke about managing a stakeholder in New York while he was based in Singapore. And because of the time difference between Singapore and New York, he had to be up at night. Right? And often he also might have missed his dinner, or he did not put his children to bed, but he made himself available many nights for his senior stakeholder. And he added value to the senior stakeholder. And Ed was somewhat surprised when the senior stakeholders said to Ed, I have a quarterly leadership meeting here in New York. I would like you to take a seat at the table. Yeah, I would like you to be part of that quarterly strategic meeting because I know you can add value. And by the way, I will take care of all your costs. And Ed was able to become, if you look at the ladder, a trusted advisor to that senior stakeholder. Now ask yourself where you spend much of your time on this relevance chart or on this relevance ladder. I'm afraid to say my work often shows that a vast majority of people are either transactional and remain as delivery managers. In other words, they become fixers, right? Problem solvers, or they are order takers. Yeah, they're order takers, and we have to deliver to the people who issue orders to us. Now, to truly attain relational power, you will have to go beyond the threshold of the delivery manager. You will have to go beyond the basic that is expected of you. The basic that is expected of you is solving problems, coming up with solutions, and meeting the expectations that are stated in your job description. Right? If that's the basic, and it's really important that you transcend the basic. So when you are able to become either a business partner or a trusted advisor, like at Boson, you will be invited to take a seat at your stakeholders' table. Take a seat at that, and you can contribute to your stakeholder by contributing to the agenda and participating in the debate. So let's look at the mindset of a trusted advisor, right? Or even before that, if I can look at the transcending being a delivery manager and becoming a business partner, right? You are a business partner when you are contributing strategic value to the stakeholders' domain of business. So, and what is even better is when you focus directly on the stakeholders' critical success factor, you're also contributing to the business, right? If you want to go beyond the business partner and become a trusted advisor, then what you have to do is to provide him the support that he needs to become successful. You have to help him to mitigate his pain points. You have to ask important questions like, what keeps you awake at night? I ask you this because I want you to have a good night's sleep. So when you contribute to his success, when you become his trusted advisor, and he will become your professional friend and your sponsor. And for sure, you have acquired relational power. And when you have acquired relational power, as we can see, you can influence even that senior stakeholder. So develop the mindset of a trusted advisor. By the way, the phrase trusted advisor was first used by McKinsey, and it was important for all consultants within McKinsey to become a trusted advisor to their clients. Right? The mindset of a trusted advisor says that you've got to focus on the stakeholder, see him as a person rather than the role that he has. See him as a person, because he has needs, he has emotions, right? He has feelings, he has thoughts, etc. So see him as a person, add value, and make him successful. That's the mindset of a trusted advisor. I think this particular quotation is somewhat self-explanatory. So what it says is that you have to become important to the other person, or you have to become relevant to the other person. And when you truly are, then that other person will reciprocate and find a way not just to make time for you, he's there for you. He has, as the Americans would say, he has your back for you, right? He has your back, should I say. And what he will also do is, when your name comes up in the corridor, and when your name comes up in meetings, such a professional friend will put up your hands for you. He will speak well of you. Now, I can't remember who spoke about, I think it might have been Michael. I think it was Michael, spoke about spiritual power.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And I think we will not disagree that care and concern and kindness to the other, taking an interest in the other, is some of the highest of human qualities. And in a sense, what we would do if we are expressing care and concern, interest in the other person, and showering the other person with kindness, we are expressing a special power, not a religious power, but a spiritual power. And if you do this consistently with your stakeholders, it will elevate you up the stakeholder relevance ladder. And what you will find is that you have a place not only in his mind, but in his heart. Right? And your name and your image will have a quick mind recall for him. He will almost always be thinking of you when an issue comes up, and who do I go to? And he could probably say, I will go to Arena. I believe that all of you are familiar with this book, right? Or should I say, this is one of the 7 habits in the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what this says is, seek first to understand and then be understood. Now, Santosh, I spoke about, who went to see his stakeholder in Dubai, did not do this. But what Santosh wanted to do was to be understood first before seeking to understand his senior stakeholder. Now, within Ernst & Young, I discovered lately, right across the world, this is extremely important. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Yeah, they have to put themselves in the shoes of their clients. Yeah. So, and how do you seek to understand? You have to master the skill. Sorry, you have to master the art and skill of asking incisive, open-ended questions. And you are tested within the organization. So all employees of Ernst & Young, all partners of Ernst & Young will have to master asking questions today. And asking questions should be one of your major skills that you develop. It doesn't come easy. If you're able to do that, and if you're able to use it consistently, you will move up the relevance ladder. You will move up.
Some points.
Yeah.
One by eight.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for the Chinese saying. I think this comes back to my point that if we put our interest aside and focus on the interest of the person, and if we focus on understanding the other person, we can learn a lot. Yeah, we can learn a lot. And I marvel, how much richness there is in other people when I ask them a question. And there is incredible learning for myself. In respect, I think Vincent Lim speaks about networking. Yeah, Vincent, this can be done. I'm always eager to share what I know. And as I was mentioning, the talk that I am actually giving is part of a 2-day workshop. Right? I'll be very happy to share my experiences. We have a message from No Nazarena. You must apologize if I don't pronounce your name accurately. I'm at quite a distance from the name. Patience level and wise thinking is required to seek first to understand. First impression is also required as a skill for both to understand and to be understood. Yeah, well, I think that what is highly needed is empathy. Empathy, yeah, where we can put ourselves aside and try and put ourselves in the shoe of the other person and to understand that. And you say first impressions is also required. I would say, I would beg to disagree. That first impressions are almost always wrong. Yeah, you have to take a deep dive to fully understand that particular person. Can I move on? Sure. Thank you for those questions. Let me say that empathy, let me also say that putting your interest aside and understanding the other person, seek first to understand and then to be understood, is extremely rare. I find this is so true in my personal life. Right? And someone asks me, how are you? And then I would share something about what's happening in my life. And before too long, the other person has hijacked my conversation. Right? And he starts talking about himself. Yeah. So I find that I'm very careful with who I share myself with. It's only through experience that I know how much of myself should I reveal. Would the other person be truly interested in me, or will he hijack the conversation? So when you're able to do this, when you're able to make this an art and skill, and live this statement, seek first to understand and then to be understood, you will become a person of importance to others. And personally, I say with all humility, it's because of the work that I've done, the coaching that I've done, and I'm also a psychotherapist. I ask a lot of questions to dive deep into others, and I am so enriched by the sharings of others. So when you acquire relational power, by becoming a trusted advisor and a professional friend to the other, when you have relational power because the other person trusts you, he accepts what you say. Yeah, you are able to influence him. You are able to alter his behavior, right, towards not only yourself, but even towards others. And he is willing to accept what you say because he recognizes that I have his interest at heart. And I've seen this happen in my coaching assignments. I've seen this happen when my coachees, my clients come to me after I have suggested to them that they ought to experiment with new behaviors with their key stakeholders. And this is what they come to say to me. They say, you know what, escalations have come down. My stakeholders no longer escalate issues or problems. Before they go to their bosses, they come to me and tell me, let's solve this problem together. Secondly, I also hear that because of the relevance of these clients of mine to their stakeholders, they become privy to information that others don't have. So they have access to things that are going to happen even before they happen. And the relationship gets so much better where the stakeholder says, hey, Santa, I will share my WhatsApp number with you. Yes, let's from time to time, let me know what's happening for you, and I will let you know what's happening for me too. I'm going to play a video, and I hope that this comes through. And this gentleman who is going to be sharing some information about the outcomes of becoming a professional friend and a trusted advisor to your stakeholder.
Let's talk today about negotiation tactics. One of the most powerful of all is called persuasion by reciprocation. Now, this is based on what is called the law of reciprocity. It's considered by many to be the most powerful law of human nature. And what it says is this: if you do something nice for me, I'll do something nice for you. I feel obligated to reciprocate. For example, if we go out to lunch together and I say, I'll pick up the lunch, you'll almost always say that I will pay for it next time. And next time you insist on paying for the lunch. Now, there's several different types of reciprocation. There's, of course, emotional reciprocation, where you make people feel good. You say, thank you, it's a pleasure to meet you, I know how busy you are, thank you very much for your time, or this is a beautiful company, or it's a great opportunity for me to speak to you. Whenever you say anything that causes people to feel better about themselves, they have a deep unconscious need to reciprocate. There's another type of reciprocation which is called material or financial reciprocation. When you do something physical for someone, for example, you help someone load their car, they want to help you load their car. You lend people money or your lawnmower, they want to pay you back by reciprocating in some way. We always like to do things for others because we have, according to psychologists, this deep need to be even. So if you do something for me, the only way that I can get even is by doing something for you. By the way, the reverse is also true. If you do something that hurts me, then I feel a deep need to get even as well, so be careful. So the starting point of reciprocation is look for opportunities to do things for others. Something as simple as bringing a cutout from a newspaper that may be of interest to a prospect. Something as simple as giving a person a book or something like that. Something as simple as opening the door or getting a cup of coffee is a very powerful technique to cause people to like you and to feel obligated to you. Use the Socratic method. Now, the Socratic method is simply by asking a lot of questions. The more questions you ask,
What happened here?
Let's talk today about negotiation.
So, okay, let me see. I don't quite understand why the video halted. So would there be any questions while we're trying to sort this one out? Okay, all right, yeah. So I'm going to, there is an issue with this particular video. So I'm going to move on to, let's see. So I think essentially what he's saying is that there is such a thing as the law of reciprocity or the law of obligation. So when, if you remember, we were talking about care and concern and kindness and giving and empathy. When you do give it on a consistent basis to another person, that other person is not going to forget it. And there will be some time that he wishes to repay, and you're going to receive care and concern and kindness from the other person. I want to share with you a very quick story, and this is something that happened for me some years ago. I went for lunch with a friend, and I didn't know him all that well. And he asked me what's happening in my life. And I said, my wife and I have seen a property and we would like to buy it. And however, there are hiccups and, that I'm not that liquid, I told him. And we're waiting for something to be sold before, to make it liquid so that I can buy the property. And then he asked me, how much do you need? And I mentioned a number. And the number that I mentioned was close to stunned by it. And I said that you're being terribly kind to me. This is really unexpected. And then he said to me, Santa, you seem to forget what you did for us. And it kind of blew me away. And then he recalled how I had put in a lot of time and effort in getting his daughter back to school from which she was expelled, right, a year ago. And so this is an example of the law of obligation or the law of reciprocity. Now, one other thing that you can do with your relational power, with people who are your professional friend, or they become your professional friend, is to be able to ask for a favor. Now, I'm not very good at asking for favors. Right? I'm terrible for asking favors because I realize that it is only of late that I'm asking for favors. And in the past, I would be afraid of the word no, right? And the no devastates me. And I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of rejection. And so I don't ask for very much. And I realize self-reliance doesn't work. I'm only shooting myself in the foot. Yeah. So I am asking for favors these days. And you are giving, by asking for a favor, you are giving the other person an opportunity to pay in kind. Remember, he wants to level things up. So by asking for a favor, he would immediately grant you that favor because he's relieved of an obligation. All right, so I'm moving on to expert power, which is the second power, which is another aspect of personal power. The definition of personal power is very much like the definition of other kinds of powers. Once I would like to repeat it. It's the ability to influence another person's behaviors of action because of the knowledge, experience, and judgments that you possess. So being an SME, a subject matter expert, implies that you have the power to influence others with your knowledge and experience. People will listen to you when you express yourself. And what you have is what other people need. And what you possess is, you can use that to add value to other people. They depend on you because you are the subject matter expert. And because they depend on you, this dependency gives you the power to influence others. Always, I'd like to emphasize this here. You always have to remember that you know a lot more than your bosses. Yeah, you know a lot more than your senior stakeholders. However, I do find, despite the fact they are subject matter experts, that they don't really create a high profile themselves. They don't create a visibility for themselves. So when they get into a meeting, right, instead of taking a seat at the table, they end up warming the seat because of their quietness. And what is not seen is the knowledge, experience, and the value these people can have, right? So it is really important to take a seat at the table and contribute to the agenda and participate in the debate so that they can see what you know, right, and the value you can add. Now, this is an example of expert power. The man you see on this slide is Deming. And Deming was especially well known in his later years for the quality control that was introduced in most manufacturing plants. He's best known for his work with the leaders of Japanese industry in Japan after World War II. Now, after World War II, the industries were decimated by the bombing. It was completely wiped out. And industrialists and engineers had to go around the world finding the best people to rebuild a Japanese industry. So he was one of those who went across to Japan, and he is even today credited as the inspiration for the Japanese post-war economic miracle from 1950 to 1960 through the processes that he enunciated, and this were implemented in these Japanese industries. Interestingly, he was better known, although he was an American, he was better known outside of America than in America for his approach to quality control. Now, he did eventually return to America, and he worked always as a free agent, as a solo player, and he was very much sought after. He was an SME for sure. He was very good at what he did. He had the knowledge, the experiences, and he could almost always add value wherever he wanted. Today, to honor him, the Japanese have come up with the Deming Prize. And this prize is given to manufacturers who pursue quality with a passion. Right? And it's a well sought after prize. So he's an example of a single individual who wielded expert power and could influence almost anybody in his field. So what do you have to do if you don't have it? Now, I don't believe you don't have it. I believe you do have it in different degrees, in some field or other. Right? As I said earlier, you damn well know a lot more than what your bosses do. So do take a seat at the table. Right? So what I would suggest you do is that you find a niche that you're passionate about, that maybe you're already working at, and continue year after year after year working on it. Get your certifications, write articles, post them on social media, find every opportunity to present it internally and externally, and gain visibility for yourself. And do the best you can. Rather than being a generalist, become a specialist. And never stop growing for the rest of your life, and you, like Deming, will have considerable expert power. So I like what it says here. It says, don't work to become a person of success, but a person of value. When you become a person of value, you will become the go-to person. And in my opinion, when you become a person of value, success will follow. When they think of someone to call, right, and you are the subject matter expert, they will call you. And because you are the subject matter expert, and you could also be the trusted advisor, you're almost always in their mind space, and it's easy to recall you when they have the need. I'm going to skip this and look at this chart, right, which juxtaposes being a subject matter expert and relation. Now, if you are both a subject matter expert and you are very good at establishing, forming relationships and maintaining and sustaining relationship, you're going to be both very likable and you're going to be highly respected. And consequently, you are going to become very relevant to people. You're going to be very attractive to people. You're going to be very important to people. So finally, I want to look at referent power. It is one form of personal power, right? And it primarily comes from the person's ability to inspire others, not only through their deeds, but through the examples, through their demonstration, right? Through many of their behavioral demonstrations, right? They lead by example. And these are people who always walk their talk, and they become role models. So let's look at the first person on the left-hand side. You will know that that person is Mandela. Now, after 26 years imprisonment by the whites in South Africa, he steps out of prison and he advocates forgiveness. Right? But for his forgiveness, there could have easily been, a civil war within South Africa. And today, the whites lived somewhat in peace with the blacks because of Mandela, and he forgave, and he lived his forgiveness as well. So secondly, you have someone who's inspired a whole host of people across the world, and that is Gandhi. Gandhi advocated, while Mandela advocated forgiveness, Gandhi advocated non-violence. And with non-violence, he defeated the most powerful or the greatest power on earth. And he showed the way for other countries to throw off the shackles of colonialism. Finally, we have Mother Teresa, who inspired lots and lots and lots of people. Now, what she did was she looked after abandoned babies, and she looked after the poorest of poor in Calcutta. And when I say the poorest of poor, these are people who were literally thrown out of their families and homes because families could not look after them. And these were the maimed, these were the disabled, and they used to live like animals, literally like animals, but they died like angels because of Mother Teresa's kindness, because of Mother Teresa's spiritual power. In a sense, coming back to Michael, right?
Yes.
They all exhibited spiritual power. So referent power comes from being admired. If I had referent power, it's because people around me had great admiration for me and respect for me. And primarily because of the spiritual power, that is demonstrated through my behavior. And more often than not, the referent leader is a role model. So if I admired somebody like Mandela, and I was in a very tough situation, I would ask myself, in this tough situation, what would Mandela do? And I would do what Mandela would do. Yeah. And thirdly, there is a connection or identification with the leader. Yeah. Very often you find that people also adopt the values of these leaders and often like to say that, I'm a believer in the principles of nonviolence. I'm a believer in forgiveness, and make that connection to Gandhi or to Mandela. Now, these referent leaders are also might be called as servant leaders. And servant leaders, sorry, let me go back. And servant leaders are leaders who take care of their people. There is care and concern and kindness. And I don't see enough care and concern and kindness in organizations. Two people are too involved in being transactional. Too many people are being involved in deliverables and numbers. So the servant leader is a servant leader because he believes that if I take care of the people will take care of the business. And this quotation also refers to that of the servant leader, if not that of the referent leader. So I come to the end of my talk. Yeah, and I have to conclude by saying that while you can't develop positional power, formal power, and the only way you can do it is by going up the corporate ladder, and that's going to be really very, very tough. You can certainly develop your personal power to address the leadership challenges that I had talked about earlier. So, as Dr. John Cotter said, become astute. In other words, become smart with cultivating power and use it effectively to influence others. use it to scale up your leadership. Thank you.
You can ask questions here.
Yeah, would you have questions, please?
I think it's into chat or something.
Sushanta?
Further up.
Further up. Actually, the ones on top, I think one comments. This part.
We may know better more than others. However, when we start to learn more, the more we know, we don't really know about.
Yeah.
Humbleness will arise.
Yeah.
Naturally, and my humble never regards itself more than it may hinder. That's always, yeah. Yeah, that's Michael again, who has come up with this wise wisdom, a statement of wisdom. The thing is, when we begin to believe that we know more than others, it's actually arrogance. And arrogance is not a trait which you can use to influence others. It actually separates you from others. So there's always somebody better than you somewhere. But nevertheless, continue to develop your expert power and continue to put it to good use, right? To serve the interest of others with humility, I would say. Okay, that's an example. How do you rank the 3 personal power effectiveness? Well, now who said that? Go, right? Yeah. Go. I find that in my personal life, I leverage more on relational power because I am not in any way technically skilled in any way. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, etc. So I don't have considerable amount of personal power, and I have become quite astute at developing relational power. And an offshoot of relational power will be referent power. And when I do work with my clients, I realize my clients have a lot of respect for me too. Yeah, and they would often look to me in a difficult situation and seek my advice. So I would say if you can develop relational power, an offshoot of that, if you keep working at it, if you keep honing your skills with developing relationships, sustaining relationships, building trust, etc., and contributing to the interest of others, you will also be highly respected and you might acquire a certain amount of referent power.
Yeah, I like that question.
Which one is that?
How do you deal with your boss?
Yeah, how do you deal with a boss who is not a good leader or knowledgeable enough? How do we look up to such a person with respect? I'm not at all advising, if he's not a referent boss, yeah, if he's not a referent leader, there is no way you can look at him with respect. Yeah. And neither can you see him as a role model. So how do you deal with him? Now, he has a lot more power. Now, you can't go and tell him in his face and tell him the truth that you are not a good leader, you're not knowledgeable enough. He's going to harbor resentment. So for me, you're not going to change him. You're not going to change him. Now, you may have to change yourself. If you like the role that you're in, you may have to change yourself. You may have to develop resilience, much more resilience to put up with a bad leader. That's one thing that you can do. The second thing that you can do is say goodbye to him and move on, or move within the organization. And as you know, there is this saying that people don't leave organizations, people leave managers. Yeah, and that's a very key reason for people moving on. So if you have a boss who is not a good leader or knowledgeable enough, I can forgive him for being not knowledgeable, because I always say directs know more than their bosses. But if he's not a good leader and he's a toxic leader, then you ought to think about moving on.
She says thank you. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
How to deal with people who take advantage of others?
Can you give me an example? The question was, how do you deal with people who take advantage of others?
Yes.
So I asked for an example.
For example, always seeking for help, assistance, time after time. I mean, all the time. But then when we ask for help from him or her, he like, you know, he wouldn't. There's no level up.
Yeah. So, what's your name? Sorry. Ashraf, who's seated with me, asked the question: how do you deal with people who take advantage of others? In other words, how do you deal with people who are always asking for help and support, etc., with his work?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, with his work, but he's not ready to reciprocate.
Yes.
Right? He's not ready to reciprocate. Now, there are three types of people. I often say they can be put in three buckets. There are givers, highly generous people. They only give and they don't mind giving, like Mother Teresa. And then there are givers and takers, where there is the law of reciprocity applies. And then there are takers. And you have to be wary of takers. And with takers, you've got to learn to establish boundaries for yourself, right? And the way you establish boundaries is to be able to say no. And to be able to say no, and of course you can bluntly say no, or you can very skillfully say no. Yeah, so that
skillfully say no.
Yeah, skillfully say no. And recently, an individual who attended a public workshop of mine in Bangalore is learning to say no internally. He was always a giver, and he realized he was being drained by giving too much, and he wasn't able to get his job done.
Yeah.
And now he's telling people, I'm really very sorry, but I don't see this as being my responsibility. Yeah. I would suggest that what you do is go speak to someone else, right? And I realize as well that I have many priorities to handle, and if I do take on and support you, timelines are going to be impacted with my stakeholders. So establishing boundaries in a skillful way is important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question.
How do you deal with graduates who think they are better than you?
I mean, the Z generation.
All right. I realize I'm a bit stumped by this. I'm really a bit stumped. I suppose, yeah, I don't know whether you can say all young graduates or some young graduates who think they are better than you, right? And I would probably go up to them and I would start asking them questions. Yes, questions like, Santa, you seem to be giving me the impression that you know a lot more than others. Yes. Can you help me? Can you unpack that for me, please?
Yeah.
Why you believe you seem to be knowing, you think you know more than others? I would ask a question. I would not do anything more than that. And I think the question will probably put them in a spot.
Yeah, I think we only have that much of time. It's already 5.
All right.
Jack, please take on that.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Santakumar, for the insightful session. We would like to invite our Deputy CEO, Mr. Kabinesh, to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Santakumar.
Okay, I'm apparently receiving a token.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kabir.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me here.
Thanks a lot.
I'm honored being here. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming to this talk. And I'm honored because I'm able to share humbly the little that I know about influencing others. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So for those present today, please click on the link provided in the chat box for your evaluation of today's session. We look forward to your valuable feedback. CPD Talks are exclusively free for MIM members. Join us as a member today to continue to enjoy attending our future talks and our other membership benefits. Thank you and have a great weekend.